My name is Vivian Kane. I am 31 years old. On my wedding day, I walked down the aisle by myself. Not because I wanted to, because my father chose my sister instead. He did it right in front of me. The bridal march had already begun. My sister stood at the entrance with her arm looped through his, her head tilted the way she always did when she wanted to seem fragile. My mother grabbed my wrist before I could move. Her grip was tighter than I expected. "She is going through a breakup," she whispered. "Do not make this harder." I stood there alone in a doorway in my dress, holding a bouquet of white roses that grew heavier with every second. Then a man stepped forward from the edge of the corridor. I did not recognize him. He held out his arm without a word, quietly, gently, like he had been rehearsing it for years. When my father turned from the aisle and saw who it was, the blood drained from his face completely. The ballroom went still. Then it did not. I am Vivian. This is the story of the man my father spent 24 years trying to erase, and what happened the day he walked back in. Let us go back to the beginning. I want to be precise about what kind of family we were, or rather what kind of family we appeared to be from the outside. A 4-bedroom house in a quiet suburb of Columbus. My stepfather, Gerald, had a job with a title that sounded important at dinner parties. My mother organized everything, the holidays, the birthday cakes, the school schedules, with a precision that left no room for anything unplanned, including feelings. Gerald Hartman was not my biological father. I have known that my entire life. What I did not know, what I was not allowed to know, was anything real about the man who was. The story I was given was simple. My biological father had left before I turned 2. He had a drinking problem. He had been unstable, the courts had declared him unfit, and he had signed away his rights without a fight. Clean, final, delivered with the kind of calm that discourages follow-up questions. I was 5 when my mother married Gerald, 7 when he legally adopted me. I do not remember being asked how I felt about it. I remember being told to say thank you. My sister came along when I was 8. She arrived the way some children do, as a soft reset for everyone else. Gerald smiled more. My mother laughed more, and I began to understand, without fully having the words for it, that my function in the family was different from hers. She was loved. I was managed. I do not say that with bitterness. It took me a long time to find the right word, but that is what it was. I left for nursing school at 18 and never moved back. Not dramatically. It was simply obvious the way some things are. Once you have been outside long enough to see the shape of what you left, I built a life in Cincinnati. I became an ICU nurse. The kind of good that comes from learning very early how to read a room, how to stay calm when everything is failing, how to hold someone's hand without making it about yourself. The wards taught me a lot, but honestly, I had learned most of it before I ever set foot in a hospital. I went home for Christmas when I could. I called on birthdays. I maintained what my mother called a connection and what I privately thought of as a careful distance. Enough closeness to keep the peace, not enough to get pulled under. Then I met Bennett. Bennett Marsh was a public defender, patient in ways that seemed almost stubborn, curious about everything, and completely incapable of leaving a room without checking that everyone in it was okay. He made me laugh. More importantly, he made me feel like I did not have to perform being fine. We were together 2 years before he proposed. He did it at home in our kitchen on a Sunday morning. No audience, no ceremony, just him in a ring, and the specific quality of quiet that means someone is not going anywhere. I said yes immediately. The wedding planning was where things started to crack. My mother was eager to help. Gerald offered to pay for the venue, which seemed generous until I realized it meant he expected to be consulted on every decision. My sister assumed she would be a bridesmaid, then bridesmaid with privileges, then effectively co-planner. I agreed to more than I should have. The way you do when you have spent your whole life calculating how much peace costs. But I held one thing. One, I asked Gerald to walk me down the aisle. He said yes. No hesitation, no conditions. He was in his kitchen with a glass of scotch in his hand, and he said it without missing a beat. And he looked in that moment like the father I had spent 31 years trying to believe I had. I built the entire ceremony around that. Yes, Bennett knew my history better than anyone. He listened the way he always did, without fixing, without filling the silence. But in the weeks before the wedding, he would sometimes get a look on his face when we talked about my family, a careful stillness like someone balancing something he did not want to spill. I caught it and asked what was wrong. He would say, "Nothing. I just love you." And I let it go each time. I had enough to manage. I did not know then what he was carrying. Here is what I knew about Thomas Hale. I was told his name exactly once, by accident. I was 9, going through a hall closet looking for scissors, and I found a manila envelope with a return address I did not recognize, addressed to my mother in handwriting I had never seen. Gerald came around the corner and took it from my hands in one smooth motion. He did not yell. He just looked at me and said, "That is not for you," and then he put it somewhere I never found. That night, I asked my mother who Thomas Hale was. She said, "He was nobody." She said it the way you say a word you do not want to give weight to. At 14, I tried again. She sat across the kitchen table from me and said my biological father had been a difficult man, that he had made choices, that the courts had looked at everything and decided in my best interest, that Gerald was my father now, and had been since I was 7, and that was what mattered. She was not cruel about it. She was just closed. The way someone is when they have been practicing closing for years, I stopped asking. Here is what actually happened. I learned it in pieces, and I will tell it the way I received it. Thomas Hale and my mother met in the early 1990s. They were together 3 years, happy in the quiet, ordinary way that does not make for good stories because nothing goes wrong. My mother has told me since that she loved him plainly, without apology. The most honest I have ever heard her be about anything. I was born in 1994. Thomas was there, present consistently, apparently joyfully. He built my crib himself from a flat pack kit he bought at a hardware store and spent an entire weekend assembling. I did not know that until I was 31. They separated when I was nearly 2. Thomas stayed involved. He drove across the city every Friday to pick me up without fail. He sent child support before he was legally required to. He was, by every measure that exists, trying. Then Gerald appeared. My mother was 27, lonely in ways that a toddler does not fix. Gerald was attentive and spoke about the future with a certainty she had not felt in a while. She fell in love. I believe that. What I can no longer believe is that she understood what Gerald would do next. When I was 6, Gerald pursued full legal custody. The stated grounds were that Thomas was an unfit parent. The evidence included testimony from 2 witnesses who described him as erratic, alcohol-dependent, and occasionally threatening. Those witnesses were lying. I did not know that for 25 years. Thomas, who could not afford the attorney Gerald had hired, sat in that courtroom with a public defender who had 17 other cases and watched the portrait of himself being painted wrong, and could not stop it. He lost custody. He lost visitation. He lost, through a subsequent termination proceeding, even his parental rights stripped on the basis of a fabricated record. He was erased legally, officially, completely. He told me later that he stood outside the courthouse for a long time after it ended. He did not know where to go. He had a truck, a job building cabinetry on the east side, and a 1-bedroom apartment that still had a drawing I had made on the refrigerator, held up by a magnet that said, "Ohio is for lovers," which he bought at a gas station because it made me laugh. He drove home. He kept the drawing. He kept all of it. He never stopped trying to find me. He hired an investigator in 2009 who tracked an address. A letter was sent. It was intercepted. He wrote for years afterward letters that went somewhere else or nowhere. He kept copies in a shoebox. 8 months before my wedding, my mother came to my kitchen and told me everything. She sat across from me and she cried. Not dramatically, just steadily. The way people cry when they have held something so long that the weight has become part of them. She said she found out about the false witnesses in 2006. Gerald had told her himself. He thought it would make her feel secure. He thought she would see it as him protecting them. She had been living with it for 20 years. "I am sorry, Vivian," she said. "I know that is not enough." She was right. It was not enough. But it was the first true thing she had ever told me about any of this, and it changed everything that came after. I did not tell Bennett right away. I was still turning it over, unsure of its shape, but he noticed I was carrying something new. He did not push. He just stayed beside it with me the way he always did. What I did not know, what I would not know until the doorway, was that 6 weeks before the wedding, Bennett had come home from work one afternoon, having met Thomas Hale. My mother had been in contact with Thomas since the previous October. She had told him about the wedding in February. She had given him the venue, the date, the time, and asked if he wanted to come. He said yes immediately, without hesitation. They did not tell me. My mother made that decision deliberately. She said later she did not know if I would allow it, and she was afraid that if I said no, I would regret it. She said she had watched me spend my whole life protecting myself from things that hurt. And she knew from experience that some protection is just distance, wearing a different name. She was probably right. I probably would have said no, and I probably would have regretted it. That does not entirely resolve it, but it is where we are. The night before the wedding, Bennett held my hands and said, "There are things in motion that I think are going to be okay. I need you to trust me." I stared at him. "That is the single least reassuring sentence you have ever said to me." He almost smiled. "I know. I am sorry. Just trust me," I said. Okay, because I did trust him, but I did not sleep well. The morning of, my mother brought me tea without being asked and held my hands a moment longer than necessary when she handed me the cup. She looked at me like she was memorizing something. Like someone saying a long goodbye or a long hello, I could not tell which. "You look beautiful," she said. "Mom, what is going on?" "Nothing," she said. "I love you. That is all." The bridal march started. Gerald was at the entrance. My sister was beside him. Her arm looped through his. Her head tilted the way it always did when she wanted to look fragile. And then I understood what was happening. My mother stepped close and caught my wrist before I could move. "She is going through a breakup. Do not make this harder." I stood there alone in a doorway in my dress. And for a moment, I was 9 years old again, holding a manila envelope and being told it was not for me. Then a man stepped forward from the edge of the corridor. He was in his late 50s, silver at his temples. He was wearing a dark suit that looked like he had bought it recently and carefully. He held out his arm without a word, no explanation, no apology, just the offer, steady and quiet, like he had been rehearsing it for years. And something in me knew before the rest of me caught up. I took his arm. When Gerald turned from the aisle and saw who was walking beside me, the blood left his face completely. The ballroom went still. The music kept playing, and we walked. I do not remember every step. I remember the weight of the bouquet. I remember the sound of the room. I remember Bennett at the end of the aisle and the way his face did something complicated and tender when he saw us coming. I remember getting to the front and Thomas leaning close and saying very quietly, "I have been trying to get here for a long time." I could not speak, so I just squeezed his arm. Gerald left before the reception ended. He did not say goodbye to me. He said something to my mother on the way out that she has not told me and that I have not pressed her on. Some things can wait. My mother sat with Thomas at a corner table for over an hour. I watched them from across the room. I do not know what they said, but she was crying and he was nodding, and at one point she put her hand on the table and he covered it with his. Bennett found me watching. He put his arm around my shoulders. "I am sorry I kept it from you," he said. "I did not want to take the decision away from you, but I also did not know how to ask you something that big in the middle of everything else." I leaned into him. "You knew before I did." He nodded. "Your mom called me. She needed someone to help make sure he got in the door. She was not sure she could do it alone." I looked at him. "You are a very strange and very good man." He kissed my temple. "You looked beautiful walking down that aisle." I said, "I had a good partner. Thomas and I have met 4 times since the wedding. We have coffee. We talk carefully. We are 2 people who missed 29 years and are navigating the geometry of that with honesty, if not always ease." He still has the drawing. He brought it to our second meeting in a clear sleeve and set it on the table between us without saying anything. It was a house with a sun in the corner and 2 stick figures standing in front of it. One small, one tall. The tall one had a caption underneath in the crooked handwriting of a 4-year-old. It said, "My dad. I am not telling this story because it ended perfectly. I am telling it because I spent 31 years believing a story someone else wrote about me. And the day I finally let someone hand me something real, even in a doorway, even without warning, it changed what I thought was possible." I walked down that aisle with my father. Late, but not too late. That is the thing about truth. It does not always arrive on time, but when it does show up, it does not need an invitation. It just steps forward and offers its arm and you hold on.